Hello and welcome. My guest today is Dr. Colin Carbis, and we're going to be talking about chronic diseases. Dr. Carbis has an extensive list of formal qualifications. He has a Ph.D. in biological science, a graduate diploma in education, in clinical hypnosis and in psychotherapy. He has a graduate certificate in journalism, is a fellow of the Australian Academy of Hypnotic Science, and a former university course advisor. He's also a co-supervisor for postgraduate students at Swinburne University. Now, Dr. Carbis is a man of adventure. He developed arthritis in his 20s in the aftermath of a viral infection. Kayaking in the ocean, he capsized in an area with contaminated raw sewage. In a few days following that, he fell violently ill, and he had symptoms echoing that of labyrinthitis. About a month later, he developed a multi-system inflammatory disease, which has progressively worsened throughout his lifetime. Today, Colin has been diagnosed with psoriatic arthritis, fibromyalgia, and chronic fatigue syndrome. Colin, welcome to Not Your Thoughts. I'm excited to do this one.
Okay, well, we'll see what we can come up with, eh?
That's it. I think a good place to start would be, can you define or help us understand what are the three conditions that you've developed?
Sure. The first one you said was psoriatic arthritis. Essentially, a lot of people have arthritis, and there's about 100 different types of arthritis. Psoriatic arthritis is an inflammatory disorder, so you generally get lots of aches and pains in your joints, and you'll also have some psoriasis. And psoriasis, I'll just give you a quick look on the camera there. You can see like a little bit of a...
We'll give it a zoom. Are you
going to give it a zoom?
Okay. If we want.
Okay, you see a little bit of psoriasis there. So people who have psoriatic arthritis will have some of these little plaques, which is sort of inflammatory skin disorder.
Sorry, just direct your voice there.
So you'll have it's an inflammatory skin disorder, and you'll see that there's a little plaque. So that's just one of many types of arthritis. There's rheumatoid arthritis, and there's all sorts of other ones. So people will know the different types that they have specifically.
So, reading your book, psoriatic, it almost sounds like that's a cop-out term. Am I mistaken in saying that?
Yes and no. I mean, the psoriasis is, well, to have psoriatic arthritis, the thing is, no one really knows what causes the chronic diseases. So there's no cure for it. They don't know where it comes from, and there's no treatments for it. So there's no sort of vaccines, there's no antibiotics. Essentially, they diagnose these things like they did 2,000 years ago, based upon a person's symptoms. So the symptoms of psoriatic arthritis, you'll have joint pain and you'll have the psoriasis plaques.
Yep.
If you didn't have the psoriasis plaques, they would look at some sort of other. So they tend to call them what's idiopathic.
Idiopathic.
And idiopathic just means I have no idea where it comes from. It's just a fancy word of saying I have no idea.
Sciencey, yeah.
Sciencey, yeah. The other one you said was fibromyalgia. This is something that a lot of people in the world have, and essentially it's diagnosed once again by symptoms. The main symptom for that one is muscle pains and aches. So, you wake up in the morning and you'll have a lot of aches and pains in your legs or your arms, and it can vary a bit between the different people. And the other one, chronic fatigue syndrome, it's a shocker of a disease. And I wouldn't say most, but a lot of medicos will say it's in your mind. It doesn't exist. But I can tell you, if you've got it, it's really bad. And for some, it's much worse for some people than it is for me. I mean, they can't basically get out of bed in the morning. They're so fatigued and so tired. And I have times where writing a book, and I'll be go to bed for 2 hours, and then I'll be awake and I'll be on the computer for 2 or 3 hours, then back to bed for 2 hours, then on the computer for 2 or 3 hours.
Yeah.
And it just completely upsets your wake-sleep cycle.
Yeah, but it does. I understand their attempt at saying it's too broad, maybe. Like how, because could a lot of people relate to that chronic fatigue?
Oh, absolutely.
Symptoms,
and what I have is sort of like a multiple of a few different ones, and a lot of these symptoms, I have about 30 odd symptoms. There's about 80 symptoms that people can sort of talk about.
Yeah.
Doctors don't like to hear more than about 2 or 3, or they think you're a hypochondriac. So obviously what they try to do is they try to treat the most severe symptoms, which is generally arthritis, so joint pain, the fibromyalgia, which is the more muscle pain, and the chronic fatigue. There's not really much you can do about it other than perhaps pretend maybe you should go and see a psychologist or something like that. It's all in your head.
You can't pinpoint certain vitamins or hormones that become lacking, or some common denominator between people that you can.
No.
Is it iron that makes a lot of people? I know that's very simplistic.
Well,
But
it's not, because I mean, look, whenever you're doing science, you're always trying to pinpoint something that's causing disease, and no one knows what causes these diseases. Yeah. But there's more than 100 different types of chronic disease, which used to be called autoimmune diseases. Some people still call it autoimmune disease, and there's about 100 of them. Yeah. So there's the things like fibromyalgia, there's chronic fatigue, there's psoriatic arthritis, there's rheumatoid arthritis, there's ankylosing spondylitis, lupus erythematosus. Lupus, basically, there's, you could go through a list for half an hour on what these, and they all have symptoms that overlap. So but it's more like they talk about a spectrum of disorders.
Yeah.
So if you've got most of the symptoms for fibromyalgia, they'll say it's fibromyalgia. But you'll have people with arthritis have a bit of that quite often as well.
Yeah.
And same with, a lot of them. Lupus will have a lot of these overlapping symptoms. But
when we say chronic and just from my understanding, that just simply means long term in this. There's no other that's not a term that's clumping them together, other than the fact that they go for an extended period of time. Is that correct?
Yeah. Look, when you're talking chronic, you're dead right. It's basically something that I picked up in my early 20s, and I've had it ever since. So most people, you never get over it, and quite often it gets a little bit worse over time. So I started with psoriatic arthritis. Now I've got 3 of them, and these multiple ones.
3 arthritis.
No, not 3 arthritis. Okay. There's arthritis, fibromyalgia, and chronic fatigue.
Sorry.
So they're actually diagnosed as different things, but there's a lot of overlap. I mean, people with chronic fatigue will often have muscle soreness as well. So there's overlap. So it's more of a spectrum of disorders. It's like long COVID is not really that much different, except we know for certain that long COVID evolves from COVID-19 infection.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
Whereas all the other ones, no one knows if they come from an infection. It seems likely, but it's interesting that once you've got these chronic infections.
Sorry, I'll jump in to make sure I'm understanding. So we're defining, similarly to how you had an ear infection to the chronic conditions, you're making an analogy between an infection would we call long chronic disease, essentially?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
And because it's only been around a few years, no one knows if it's going to last a lifetime.
Yeah.
Personally, I think it will. But see, we're also, sort of a little bit confused is there's the symptoms that will be very similar to fibromyalgia, for example, which will probably last for a lifetime. But because it's a pretty nasty disease and affects a lot of different organs, you may have severe, quite a bit of heart damage. And, that can cause, it's not actually a chronic disease. It's actually injury to the heart tissue or to the intestinal tissue or something like that. So it's separate, if you like, to the chronic part. But the interesting thing is these chronic diseases are not infectious.
Not infectious.
They may have been caused, I say may, so some may have been, some may not, but they may have been caused by some sort of pathogen.
Yeah.
But you can't catch a chronic disease from somebody.
Interesting.
So, yeah, it's just some theories will say that, like in some people will theorise that the virus is still there somewhere, maybe protected inside a white blood cell or something, and it's releasing some sort of protein which your body's reacting against.
That's interesting because there's something in there that's causing it.
I don't believe that, but that's what some theories will say.
So then
the virus is still there.
But what is there then if there's nothing? I know you're not saying nothing, but what is there then if it's not the virus?
There's a lot of different theories, and we won't go through all the different theories.
Of course,
but sort of like there's one called molecular mimicry. So essentially, what they're saying is that your body has learned to react against some sort of tissue in your body that's very similar to maybe some parts of the microbe. So say you've had some sort of bacteria and there's some antigens or parts, proteins, whatever you want to call them on the outside of the microbe, your body learns to react against it. And then if that's very similar to some, say cartilage tissue, then your body sees the cartilage tissue as something you react against. Personally, I don't believe that's the case. I followed all through these things for a very long time in my research. But if that was the case, then it would constantly react against those things. So you look at a lot of people that have chronic disease like me, and it's very what you call undulant. So one day you might be feeling okay. The next day it knocks you for 6.
Yeah.
And you feel sick as a dog. You might have incredible pain in your knees. The next day it's gone. Even hours away. Sometimes I'll have a headache in the morning and then it's gone.
Yeah.
And I don't take any drugs at all for my condition. So it's not like if I feel really bad, I'll go and have a sleep.
Yeah.
And when I finish after 2 hours having a sleep, it's gone. Most people will take a drug as a painkiller and say, oh, that worked because 2 hours, it worked, it's gone. But, is it gone because of the drug or is it gone because of something else in the environment which caused it in the first place?
Yeah. So what I'm hearing is there's no direct link as to why it would occur one time compared to another, or no observable link that we know yet. And you're creating that link, or not creating, observing a link between them is what we're trying to get.
Yeah, it's essentially back, if you go back 2,500 years ago, Hippocrates, who's basically regarded as the father of medicine, he said that there's something in the environment which progresses disease. He's also the one where they call the Hippocratic Oath. So they took the Hippocratic Oath, and it's a sort of an oath, if you like, which guides people's thinking. Basically, do no harm.
I think most people have heard the Hippocratic Oath, but even myself. But before reading your book, I never actually linked it to an individual who was kind of the
Hippocrates.
I had no idea that was linked there at all.
Yeah. But the other interesting thing, he made quite a few things. The two things probably that still exist is the Hippocratic Oath, and the other thing at the time when there was lots of diseases around, he said that it's not caused a divine intervention, if you like. So at that time, if a person got syphilis, the society would say, well, God did that to you. He gave you this disease because of your philandering ways, and you sort of run around doing these things you shouldn't be doing. You're
burn
immoral.
the witch, yeah.
Yes. So, and the same with anything, if you got any disease, it was God's done this to you because of your ways. You've done the wrong things.
You deserve this.
You deserve this. That's exactly right. And you might think it doesn't exist. That's gone. It's finished. But when AIDS came around, a lot of people blamed homosexual society for the same thing because it was more in homosexual
from
males.
a moral perspective.
Yes.
You're saying,
so a lot of people did, but obviously it's been found that that's just a load of rubbish.
Oh, yeah, it is, but it's also a behavioural observation as well, which you can make a moral claim for as well.
You can, and so some groups will say that it's this is God's way of punishing you for doing whatever you're doing.
Yeah, because I've heard as well that have you heard of I always butcher the word Malthusian crisis, where if it's kind of like a population control scenario where if you end up overproducing, you don't have enough infrastructure or food to basically sustain a population. So to prevent that, supposedly, we need to create these moral or value claims. And unfortunately for women in the past, it was, hey, if you have sex, you're the problem, because women are gatekeepers to sex.
Yeah.
So socially, we ostracized and shamed women for doing it to prevent a overpopulation, and that way we could maintain our society. So not to dive too deep into that, but I can see how scientifically or objective claims can transition into a value claim because it has a utility or a purpose. So not taking away from the fact that Hippocrates, sorry, I guess was the founder of pulling us away from this kind of divine intervention into this, what would the term be? Let's call it scientific.
They used to call it divine retribution.
Yeah.
So it was God's way of sort of punishing you for, and it wasn't just a sexual thing. It was anything, even if there was no reason. It might have been based upon your nationality or something. There's lots of reasons why. But of course, Hippocrates said, no, it's not. It's caused by something else. He didn't know about pathogens or microbes. That was way thousands of years later before they learned about bacteria and things like that.
But the intuition pulled us away from this kind of the God gap, they call it, where it's like, hey, we can't answer this. Must be Zeus,
Yeah. So like I say, no indication of microbes, but he based everything on observation and did thorough, sort of interviews with people and found out about their history, their family history, which is sort of linking into genetics and things like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, he was sort of star of most of this stuff. So the only two things that really sort of were maintained was the link between divine retribution and the Hippocratic Oath. But he also made a lot of proclamations about, which was where my interest is about the environment.
Yeah.
Is basically can maintain disease or cause disease progression and the likes. So
well, I want to dive into that, but before we get there, if we can, it's obviously, I guess it's all linked. Can you help me understand the jump from, in your specific instance, in a viral ear infection, how are we transitioning to chronic disease? Not the fundamental biology, but just conceptually, what's the transition look like? Because I'm struggling to even create a concept of it or visualize it. I don't know how to think about it.
You're not the only one to think that way. When I first got this, all I could say was I had a viral infection, which I got kayaking down on the Great Ocean Road, and I didn't realise at the time, but there was a sewage outlet there, which means obviously lots of bacteria, viruses, and whatever else. And I took a dump in not a dump as in a dump, but I got dumped in a...
I contributed.
I got dumped by a wave.
Yeah.
I went upside down and, all this water up your nose, through your eustachian tubes, and essentially I developed an inner ear infection. And I was as sick as a dog for a couple of weeks. I couldn't move out of bed without vomiting, and it took about 2 or 3 weeks, and it took several months before I could sort of play volleyball and not fall over and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Your balance is pretty cooked for a while. But, once I got that, my knee swelled up like a balloon.
Yeah. I saw the photo. Man, I would recommend because the book is being published as we speak.
Yeah.
I would highly recommend people actually pick the book up and give it a read because the photos in it, I saw the photo of your knee as well.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's specifically linked to that instance.
It was,
or
yeah.
another time. Man,
that was about 2 years after.
That photo.
Yeah, so
okay,
that was still, it was huge, as you can see. The knee was blown up like a balloon.
Yeah.
All the other joints were still very painful, but they didn't swell up like that. And that was the first thing that happened, and then all the other issues developed on from there. But yeah, it's like when you get something like this, and everyone that's probably had a chronic disease has done the same thing. You go doctor shopping, looking for an answer.
Yeah.
And mostly it's sort of like, it doesn't take you long to realise that the medical field knows absolutely nothing about chronic disease other than how to give you drugs, not to treat the disease, but to treat the symptoms of the disease.
Interesting. Yeah.
So they're not actually treating the disease.
Or not curing.
No, there's no cures.
Yeah, okay.
There's no treatments. There's basically giving you drugs to ameliorate the symptoms of disease. And that's not knocking the medical profession in the slightest. If you come to a doctor and say you've got all these headaches, they give you some analgesics to help you over that, and that's basically what they should be doing. But there's, when you've got a whole lot of symptoms and you're going to take drugs for the rest of your life, you can think of it, do I want to take all these drugs with all their side effects, and basically short term I'm going to feel better, but long term, you may suffer organ damage or whatever because some of these drugs are pretty nasty.
Well, it's that, and a point you made which really resonated with me was you disconnect with your relationship with your body. You stop listening to your body. You stop hearing what it's trying to tell you there's so much I want to dive into, but I don't know how much we want to give away as well. But this kind of the relationship with pain and your body and your family's history as well of just, the story of the extreme poverty and where they got to and all the things that come with it. And just this theme of pain. As a society today, even a headache we can't even handle. Whereas, do you mind me mentioning some spoilers in here?
No, you go for it.
The story of your mother where she was, I can't recall, 8 years old or whatnot, just a kid playing with an axe. And the solutions that they had to come up with at the time. An 8-year-old child putting up with more pain than adult men of our generation. And it just absolutely baffles me. And a part of that is socially, culturally, how what you're saying now is just take the Panadol. Like even now, if I got a minor headache, my family's like, Panadol, take it. I'm like, whoa. I've always just been like, I need to hear my body. So hearing you talk or reading you talk about that, I think that's the right terminology, really rung true. And that's what that triggered that thought just now, hearing you speak.
Look, there's certainly a lot of family history in sort of stuff like that. But I think one of the other things I did athletics for so long, and any athlete that's trained really hard will know that, when you're doing some hill training, for example, you get to the top of the hill and you dry reach and feel, and you go back and do another one and then another one. And I think, you sort of start to feel, you need to feel comfortable being uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And when you can do that, then, getting something like arthritis or fibromyalgia, you've already trained yourself to think in that way where you think, well, it's pain, just forget about it and get on with it.
So you're well versed in physical pain from what I understood. How do you distinguish positive pain from negative pain, if there even is a distinction?
Look, pain is just...
Or growth, we can call it, like growing pain or just damaging pain.
Well, pain's there as a as a way of sort of basically your body saying, stop doing what you're doing.
Signal.
It's a signal, yeah. And I mean, if you put your hand on a stove, the pain signal is going to go straight to your brain and say, get your hand. It doesn't... It's got to happen at a subconscious level to say, get your hand off the stove or you're going to burn. So you go bang, bang, it's gone.
It's reflexive, yeah.
If you think about it, you have to wait until you go through the conscious stage. And then next thing
I'm in pain.
burns you, I'm in pain. So, but the problem with chronic pain, it's always there.
Yeah.
And, I think if you take what most people do is they take drugs to try and dampen down the pain.
Yeah.
So, you can live with a bit more. But I don't know what, for me, taking drugs just don't make you feel, sort of like I've got this pain, which feels bad, and I've got these drugs which make me feel sick. I think I'd rather just put up with the pain.
It's such a weird experience, mate. I've recently banged my finger. I'm usually email guy, but I tried to be a hammer picket guy.
Yeah.
The situation called for it. Didn't work out. Yeah. I'm really lucky that it created a cut so that the blood could get out and not just kind of become a ball.
Yeah.
But there was something weird because knock on any wood, I hadn't felt pain in such a long time. And I'm like, this feels so human. And I want to say I appreciated it because I'm like, this is a sensation I don't feel often. I hate it. I don't want to say I loved it, but there was something grounding about it as well. Yeah. And I feel like we're losing that constantly. Dampen seems to be the perfect word in this scenario.
With the interesting thing about a lot of the pain that a lot of people get with these sort of things, they don't realise that it's very seasonal. And it's also, like in a day, like I could have a headache in the morning, it goes, and I can get a headache later at night. And it just goes. No drugs, no nothing to make it come and go. It just does. But if you're on drugs, you don't realise that because you think the drugs are modifying everything all the way.
Yeah.
So you have a headache, you take a pill, the headache goes, but it might have gone anyway. Later on, you think, my headache's back. I'll take another pill and it goes. So this is the undulant nature of a lot of chronic diseases, which I think most people don't realise. Yeah. There's an interesting thing happened when I was working on arthritis and getting paid for it, because most of the research I've done I haven't been paid for. But I, pardon me, I was interviewing a rheumatologist and I said, do you ever have anybody come up to you and say, that their arthritis gets worse when the weather changes? And she said, I get them idiots all the time. I thought, I didn't say
you're like sweating there. You're like, oh.
I said, I'm one of those idiots. So I won't say that I'm one. So anyway.
Like, we hate them people. Yeah.
So, and I just thought, you get a lot of them. Oh, you wouldn't believe the number. Yeah. And I thought, well, maybe there's no, he says, there's no research or anything to sort of prove that's the case.
Yeah.
And I thought, but you've got all these people coming into you saying, they've got it. Why don't you listen? Yeah,
it's very unscientific to make the assumption that I think that there was a phrase. It was lack of evidence doesn't mean it's evidence that it's lacking. Yeah, if that makes sense.
Yep.
Yeah, very unscientific to say.
Absence of evidence is not evidence of absence.
I read that from you.
Did you?
I guess so. Yeah. I don't know. That was where I got it from. Maybe. Exactly. Yeah. If that's come from yourself, then. Yeah, there you go. There you go. Yeah.
But you would think that, look, I guess people have, for thousands of years, people have been trying to predict changes in the weather based upon their sore knees and sore arms. Or you'll still hear people say, mate, I've got an ache in my knee. The weather's going to change. Problem is they can't say it's going to rain or it's going to be windy or it's going to be sunny. But they're pretty spot on saying that there's going to be a change in the weather. We'll talk about this in another time, perhaps.
We'll dive
So
into
I,
that.
I,
Yeah.
I won't give you all the answers to this.
Yeah, all right. This is just
But-
the teaser. But yeah, the rheumatologist.
Oh, look, it's been going on for years, for thousands of years.
Yeah.
But any medico you go to will say, oh, it's all rubbish. There's no evidence to prove it. If you dive back into the sort of more the historical literature, and most people who do research don't, historical literature is anything more than 3 years
Yeah.
before now.
Irrelevant.
Well, yeah, it tends to be regarded as irrelevant because they think, well, we've got new stuff. Let's move on. But quite often it's a good thing to go back and like look at Hippocrates 2,500 years ago, and he basically they didn't have all these sort of like machines and whatever to be able to help you diagnose. They did things by observing and spending a lot of time looking at what's going on.
They also didn't have the amount of financial conflicts of interest that we do in our current, studies or the what's your take? And not too much of a divergence. Do you think if something's not peer reviewed, it's redundant?
No, of course not.
Okay, because that became a common theme in very recent years, where it was kind of like this this gatekeeping of science, where if it's not peer reviewed, irrelevant.
Oh, look, there's what they call a hierarchy of evidence, right? So you up the very top is your placebo trials and double-blind placebo trials, and then down the bottom is an anecdote, which is someone's come into your clinic and they said, oh, my knees hurt every time it rains. That's an anecdote. So it's not evidence, but 10, 15, 20 people come in and say the same thing. You've got to be a bit silly not to think, well, something's going on here.
Yeah. Is there a number that changes anecdote to population level data?
Well, that's just statistics.
Yeah, but is statistically, is it not all anecdotes to some degree?
Well, generally speaking, you have to design your trial and add in all the various bits and pieces to sort of make it a proper scientific study.
Yeah, the empirical method, yeah.
Yeah, but you can still take, if you did a survey of all these people and said, how does this happen with you? Do you find that your joints get more? But no one's, I think, really done that. But then, then they want to know, and fair enough, they want to know, okay, what's causing it? So there's been studies where they've looked at atmospheric pressure.
Okay.
And thought that atmospheric pressure was causing, because it changes as the weather changes. And, people will say, oh, it's caused by atmospheric pressure. Some people say that might be wind. And if you talk to any emergency nurse or if you talk to a lot of teachers, they'll say, when the wind comes out, everybody goes crazy. There's all these problems and kids go crazy and everyone comes in the emergency department, all this sort of stuff. So, this is just anecdotal type evidence.
Yeah, and I can imagine it being hard to for you to find the research without asking the leading questions as well. Because in the example of the rheumatologist, it's perfect because he said, "Yeah, they're coming to me. They're all idiots."
Yeah.
I don't know how you would set up a questionnaire that kind of says it without, because if I'm experiencing something and I see the question, does it come from the weather? It feels a bit too overt and explicitly, presented to me. I feel like I'd want to, as an observer of this data, kind of know, or how can you falsify that you haven't asked the leading question, which led them to say yes. I guess I'm just curious, not curious, but it's just a thought that's come up now, and I'm saying the words, I guess.
Yeah, all that. I think. Well, first, as we talked about, most people take drugs to help with their pain and things like that. So the simple fact, as you were saying, you're not really in touch with your body. Once you take the drugs that sort of modify pain, then you're not really in tune with what's happening in nature.
Yeah.
See, I don't take any drugs, so I know very well that change is coming.
Yeah.
And I can sort of predict a change 10 hours away.
Interesting.
And I'm pretty accurate.
Yeah.
But I can't tell you what it's going to be.
Gotcha.
So I can't say it's going to rain or it's going to be, after 30 odd 40 years, you do really tune into the environment pretty well if you haven't taken drugs. But if you're taking drugs and you're not thinking about it.
Yeah.
But I've spent all this time trying to research it, and I've done a Ph.D. where I looked for all the sort of microbes in an environment and sort of really thought about, okay, what sort of microbe, because we talked about ear infection, what sort of microbe could do this? And because there's never been like a type thing, there's a lot of microbes being implicated in the development or the evolution of chronic disease. But the problem is, you look at something like rheumatoid arthritis, and if you go through the literature, there's several different types of microbes that will cause, or that where a chronic, like rheumatoid arthritis evolves from a previous infection. But there's not one microbe that causes it. There's several.
Okay.
So it doesn't seem to be a specific one that causes it. The only case where you can really see this is with, because it's so obviously linked to a COVID-19 infection. And half the world's been infected with it, probably more than half the world by now, but you got this COVID-19 infection, then not that long after, some people run about 5 to 20% of people develop.
Wow, I didn't know it was that high.
It's pretty high. Even depending upon what literature you look at,
Even so,
it's still between 5 and 20%.
that range, yeah,
which is huge, because a lot of people can't work hardly anymore because they've got.
Yeah.
If you think every time someone gets a infection, then maybe they'll develop long. That's pretty serious sort of stuff.
Yeah.
There's trillions of dollars being lost in the economy because of long.
Yeah, and pressure on the medical system and all the good stuff. Before that, though, my brain fixated because I find it so intriguing. The fact that you gave a number, 10 hours. I know it's not concrete. We're just talking conceptually. I think because I think if the data's there, the data's there. But my brain kind of goes to remove any element of because I think people can digest it as a form of mysticism, which I don't believe, but I can see why it might, because it has a predictive element, it can be viewed in that sense. Correct me if I'm wrong and jump in wherever. When you say that, again, we're not concrete, we're not fixated on the number 10, but does that imply that there is a weather change X value distance away that you've picked up on prior or at a larger radius? Or do you feel it is predictive of something that is at that point in time, non-existent and then becomes existent?
I'll explain that completely at another time.
Okay, yeah.
But as soon as you say the word predict, you'll instantly get all the doctors offside. Because, I've been called Nostradamus quite a few times. And a lot of people, as soon as they say, oh, I can predict the weather's going to change, and you used to hear this big sigh But
science is a prediction. Science is a hypothesis, a method, a model, which can create predictions of the future. So if the evidence suggests it, or if it's leaning towards the nature of that or a direction, then I don't see why people can be so close-minded to say, nah, everything is a prediction.
Yeah, it is. But, science requires evidence. And until you can say, okay, or come up with a good, credible theory that says this is why I can predict this. So, people have looked at things, like I said, like atmospheric pressure. So you get changes in atmospheric pressure which come before the actual thing. But, there's no proof that's the case. And, so people have made a few predictions and none of them are actually credible.
Yeah, okay.
So I'm hoping that next time we have a chat, I'll give you the exact what is credible, and you'll find that no one will be able to dispute that based upon the theoretical evidence that I've given.
Yeah,
and
okay.
There'll be plenty of supporting arguments from the peer-reviewed literature that will prove that.
Exciting times.
But there's too much to talk about for
100%. No, agreed. I guess how have your conditions actually changed the trajectory of your life? Was there certain expectations for your life in a certain way, and what effect has that had on your life, the conditions that arise?
Oh, I never expected to be in science.
Oh, really?
Never in the world. I did a biological science degree, first off, because it was free back in those days. And I thought, what else am I going to do with my life? My brother did science. Yeah, I'll do science. But, I was an athlete. And in my sort of early 20s, I won the Victorian Javelin Championship as a junior. I won the Victorian pole vault champion, and I won the Victorian decathlon champion.
Yeah.
First year out of junior, I got second in the Australian championships.
Yeah.
Or Victorian championships or something. I won the it's called Australia Games. It's a bit like the one where Usain Bolt come out and they had a lot of internationals and
wow, yeah.
stuff like that. So I won that one as well.
And the man has receipts to show it, all in book one.
Yeah.
All in the photos, yeah.
And the medals too.
And the medals, yeah.
And I was doing opera singing as well, which I'd been doing for about 10 years. And I was really enjoying that, and I was getting some places with different shows and all that sort of stuff. And when I got arthritis, and this developed in my early 20s after a good old paddle in the beach down there,
Yeah.
that was it. There was no more athletics because, you know, you try running up and planting a pole vault in a pole in the box when your balance is off. I mean, it's sort of like...
Oh, because it does, the ear affects balance as well, right? Yeah.
But yeah, that was it. That was pretty much the end of athletics, and then you get all this build up of phlegm and stuff around your vocal cords, so you can't sing properly.
Yeah.
But it's undulant, so sometimes I can sing pretty good, sometimes I can't at all.
But you went through a period of like pushing through the athletics while...
I tried my best. But you know, there's this. You just couldn't.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, it sort of got worse, and you know, there's times where I could hardly even walk.
Yeah.
So athletics was. I mean, I still went out and did all the. I mean, you know, sort of was always on bushwalking, mountain biking, whitewater kayaking, sea kayaking, and I could still do those, but it became more sea kayak and whitewater kayak because my knees were so blown up, and you could hear it sort of grating and grinding as you're walking up the hill. And I thought it's only a matter of time before my mates are going to be carrying me up the hill.
Yeah, or commando walking through borderline quicksands.
Yeah, that's right. So yeah, I got more into whitewater kayak and sea kayaking, which I did lots of that, and that was just fantastic.
Yeah.
But the interesting thing there is, you know, when you go out and you go out in the bush a lot, you start to realise different places can completely change how you feel. So, you know, on the Snowy River, there's a whitewater area from the New South Wales border, which goes right down to Buchan and beyond all the way down to the ocean. It's about, I don't know, 3-4 day kayaking trip. And sometimes I felt really, really bad. And then we got to this waterfall. It's not actually a waterfall. It's a huge rapid. It's called Gentle Annie. And we run out of time. So I had to camp at the base of this big rapid. And it was a lovely sandy beach, but the noise was just unbelievable because it was just water crashing between rocks and all that sort of stuff. And I thought, we're not even going to be able to sleep here. Yeah. It's so noisy.
Oh, as in too noisy,
Yeah, it was just so noisy. And I had the best night's sleep, and I had no arthritis when I woke up in the morning.
Okay, yeah,
and
yeah.
You know, start to notice, what you really notice things where you don't feel, when you feel good, you think, my God, what is it? What is made me feel so good here?
I think, that's bang on, because baseline became pain for you, absence of pain became very noticeable. Yeah. And it's like, what's changed in this space, in this environment that's interacting with your body?
Yeah.
And all the more reason that it is, yes, anecdotal at this point in time, all you've told me right now, but very much scientifically anecdotal, or it follows it follows a reasonable method in kind of understanding why it plays out that way.
I mean, basically, Einstein would always say, ask questions. Yeah. You know, you observe something, ask questions. And after 40 years of having this, you know, every time something happens where you think, wow, I've got no pain, it makes you say, what is it about this place or what's happening here in the environment where I don't have pain? Because that's what you want.
Yeah.
You desire to be, you think, wow, I wonder if I live there, I'd have no pain if I live there.
Yeah.
You come back another time and you've got pain. You know, and normally you sort of think a weather change is associated with more pain, because around here in Melbourne, you know, if I know there's a weather change, like I've been pretty bad in the last couple of days because we've had bad weather. Yeah. And I've, you know, been really bad. I can hardly walk sometimes. And then 4 hours later, I'm like a spring chicken. Yeah. But it was an interesting place. We went on an island. We sea kayaked from Mission Beach to the Dunk Island, through to the Family Islands, then across to Hinchinbrook. There was a big, long sea kayaking trip, island hopping. We got to one island, and it was like,
that's
really
awesome, man.
Oh, it was beautiful, absolutely beautiful. We got this little island. It's like a little flat coral island. It's just, I don't know, above sea level, maybe a metre, if that. And it's just like, got some lovely trees on it. When we camped there, there's no people. And I felt pretty average. And then we looked out across the ocean, and all you can see is this huge storm brewing. And then you see these black clouds and all these lightning and thunder, and it was pretty scary, because when you have a look at it, and as it came in, it looked like the waves were higher than the actual island. We thought, my God, we're going to get blown away. But you know, there's obviously reef around the island, so the waves crash and they don't come out and, you know, swallow up the island. And when we got in the middle of the storm, I had no pain whatsoever.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, so you know, before the storm came, there was a lot of pain. Yeah. And after the storm had gone right through and we're back to blue skies, a lot of pain. But right in the middle of it, I felt absolutely superb. It was raining, heavy rain, and the rain was almost pulling the tent apart and the wind was blowing. When we got to the middle of the storm, it was like, they say you get this spot where there's no wind. You had some rain, but there was no wind. It was different, you know.
It was like a moment of environmental change.
Yeah, whatever it was at that stage, and I don't know. Well, I do know what I think. We'll talk about
well, what you at this point in time have observed.
Yes.
Yeah.
So you observe these things, but not all storms are the same.
And sorry, because so two things in my mind. One of them makes me want to ask: are you noting down the times you did not predict the weather, a weather change, or yeah?
Yeah, basically, you just log all these different things. Another one is like on the edge of a cliff.
But then can we dig into that a bit more? Yeah. Do you have a ratio where times of it's been correct? I don't need to know numbers now, and I know you're going through all of it, but yeah, do you have a ratio of the times you aren't correct, and then are you making correlations there as to what the difference there was?
To a point, what I've done over the time is basically, you make an observation and you sort of say, the advantage of these days compared with earlier times is we've got the internet and I can go back and I can look at every bit of research that's ever been done on anything. So if you get an idea, you go back and look through the internet and you search all these things and sort of say, okay, I predict this. Does anyone else through the peer-reviewed research given the same sort of indication or whatever? So it's pretty easy to sort of prove or at least get support from the internet and other research. So I don't have to do the research. Someone else has already done it. Yeah. And I can use their research
to
support it.
Yeah, I understand.
So, when you put together a theory, that might be sort of like, say, 100 different points to make this theory.
Of course, yeah.
And you can pull in a lot of support.
References, yeah.
I mean, 6 years I've been writing this and another couple of books that are related to it. And there's a hell of a lot of research and reading. So, I'm up most of the nights, 2, 3 hours, 4 hours with a fever. So... sort of wake up at about 1 o'clock, almost exactly on the dot every night.
Really?
Yeah, and I'm sort of super hot, and I've got a fever. And this is the middle of winter. Okay. So like last night, wake up 1 o'clock, I'm hot, throwing all blankets off, and it's probably about 3 or 4 or 5 degrees in the house. I go sit in the computer in my undies, and sit there until I start getting freezing cold and start to yawn. And then I go back to bed.
Yeah, yeah.
But that's a fever. That occurs, and it seems to occur pretty much every night at the same time or thereabouts. But that's if I go to a different place, I might not have that.
So there's links, yeah. Can you make that distinction, or would you consider anxiety or depression a form of chronic illness or disease, and is that linked to potentially the environment as well?
Can be.
Because I've personally had like anxious moments where, although I don't want to dive too deep into it now, but yeah, definitely moments where it's kind of unlinked and I'm not going to give the appropriate context. So it's just going to be a very abstract thought right now. But moments where, although I knew the cause, it was definitely environmentally influenced. Maybe as a second principle. First principle is the personal part. The second principle element definitely felt environmental.
Yep.
And I guess I'm just explaining where the thought came from to ask you that.
When I was trying to, I've been trying like for 40 years to try and get an answer to this. So it was pretty obvious that the medical field had no idea about what causes it. So what's called the etiology of chronic disease. So I did my first PhD where I was essentially looking for microbes and ways of, so I've developed tests for microbes and all that sort of stuff. And then I sort of stopped working for a while because I had a lot of arthritis problems, so I was on a disability pension for a while. And while I was doing it, I was looking after one of my daughters and then also doing research on virtual reality hypnosis.
Yeah, yeah.
So essentially that was all about, I didn't really understand it all that well, but we was getting some brilliant results from it. And I was mostly looking at pain, because I was thinking, is pain, because I've got a lot of pain stuff, and I was thinking, can we do some sort of psychological intervention to help with pain? And I started to realise that, it's all this pain is all about anxiety. We weren't really doing anything else other than treating anxiety.
Okay, yeah.
And I had an interesting chap, I'm not sure I talked about it in the book. Oh, no, I don't think I did, maybe in the next one. But he was blown up in Bali, and he was in a hospital, And this was actually the first guy we ever treated with virtual reality hypnosis. We went into the hospital, and he was having real problems with pain, so they gave him self-administered morphine. So you basically, they press a buzzer every time they feel pain. Yeah, pretty much. Well, but there gets a point.
Yes.
It gets a point where it stops.
As in they stop, or you build a tolerance?
No, you don't build a tolerance. It gets a point where if you keep doing that, you're going to take an overdose and kill yourself.
Oh, okay.
So it gets a point where that's it. You've got as much self-administered as you can take.
Yeah.
And he still was rating his pain about 5, 6, 7 out of 10.
Give me the drugs. Oh, because poor guy, he's blown.
He's in burns. He had burns all over his body, and he was in a lot of pain.
Yeah.
Anyway, he's also had lots of problems with acute stress disorder. So he was sort of jumping around, and he had insomnia, and he had nightmares. He had insomnia because he had nightmares about the explosion. So one time he jumped off the bed, and he just had grafts and all sorts of problems, and it was a huge problem. They had to have someone watching him 24 hours a day.
Yeah.
Anyway, we did this virtual reality hypnosis on him, and I said, he didn't want to talk to anybody. He just swore at everybody, including his psychiatrist.
Rightfully so. Like, I'd be mad at the world as well.
Oh, he wouldn't talk to her,
Yeah.
Just not, she tried. Anyway, I just went in. The psychiatrist told me, look, you won't be able to talk to him. So I said, look, got this stuff. Just put it on, see what you think, and I'll just go and leave you and come back and take it off, and which I did.
Is this the one that was on the Today Tonight episode, or this is a different instance?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
So he wasn't on that. We did an interview with him.
But that was the unit.
Yeah.
Because that reminded me of that.
Yeah. So we've had people with acute stress disorder and PTSD, which worked really well. He basically, his pain went down to pretty much zero.
Really?
But and the reason, I couldn't work out why. But if you took away the morphine, he still had a heap of pain.
Yeah.
And if you took away the hypnosis or the guided meditation, whatever you want to call it, he would still have a lot of pain.
Yeah.
So, the pain is a composite of the two things. So there's a physical pain and there's an emotional pain or a psychological part of the pain.
Yeah.
And if you don't treat both, then you don't get it right down.
The full, yeah. It's almost like a support to you dampen as much as you can biologically, and then the psychology can bring it further. But it needs to be secondary in this instance.
Well, you don't want to go without the morphine.
Yeah. And I think that kind of rings to me this concept that pain is physical and present, but what I'm hearing you say is suffering. That's like a somewhat slightly different concept where pain is physical, but suffering is of the mind.
Well, pain, it's like, you play football. I mean, most people can relate to, they've been out and played sport at some stage, and you're out playing football and you get hurt pretty bad, but you don't even know it because you're still playing football.
Yeah.
You're in the moment, you're in the zone, as they would call it, and you're sort of still carrying on until you get to kick the ball and you've got the point, and then all of a sudden it's like this pain kicks in.
Yeah, it's all when you rest. As soon as I've transitioned to new position or new state of mind or new frequency, that's when I'm
new state of mind.
Yeah, that's when I'm like, oh, all right.
Yeah. So you're in the flow,
Yeah, flow, that's right.
And as long as you're so 100% focused on the football and the game, you don't feel the pain.
Yeah.
But when you go sit on the bench and you're thinking about something different, it's like, wow.
Yeah.
That hurts.
So is hypnosis, and we will dive into it deeper next time, but is that inducing a flow state? Is that essentially what's happening?
Well, a lot of people have known about what's caused hypnosis. It was sort of originated by Mesmer back in the 1700s, I think it was. But it was, if you go back to about 2,000 years ago, it was written in some of those really earlier texts about hypnosis type things. But we did some work at Swinburne Uni, what was called Brain Science Institute at the time, where we used electroencephalograms, and essentially they put all these little things over your head and they monitor brainwave frequencies. And we also had the virtual hypnosis going on, so you had virtual reality glasses and all the sort of background audio stuff with it. And you could see that there was a dissociation happening between different parts of the brain. And
wait, sorry, this is the association between...
No, dissociation.
Oh, sorry, I thought you got that wrong. I didn't want to...
Dissociation. So I
thought you got that wrong. I'm like, I don't want to correct it. Well, I've never heard of dissociation.
So some parts of the brain are not sort of communicating with other parts of the brain.
Is that not disassociation?
Well, I think they call it dissociation.
Okay, sorry, apologies.
Or disassociation.
Okay, cool. That's fine.
But essentially, when that happens, the whole concept, the whole idea of a lot of sort of these types of things is essentially whenever I say something to you, like you're going to, because you're an adult, you're going to, if I say something to you, you're going to evaluate it consciously.
Yeah, with this like left brain kind of
I'm not so much
analytic.
left and right.
Okay.
It's really, you're just going to say, okay, I just said something to you. You're going to evaluate, say, do I believe this? And based upon your experiences in life and based upon what you've known, you can say, I don't believe it. So you reject it. I thoroughly believe it. Might be wrong, but I thoroughly believe it based on my experiences, or you modify it based upon your experiences.
Yeah.
So it's reject or it's accept or modify.
Out my model of the world. Where does it fit into the
Yes.
axiomatic kind of structure there? Yeah.
That's right. But if you're a little kid, only about 7 or 8 years old or even earlier, you tend to, if it's a person of authority, you'll just tend to accept it.
Yeah.
That's why they say, give me the child to the age of 10 and I will give you the man.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Because you can
mold them.
You can
Essentially.
mold them. You can basically brainwash them pretty easily.
Yeah. Conditioning. Yeah.
But you can sort of do a similar thing with hypnosis type techniques.
Yeah.
Because what you're doing is you tend to get rid of the conscious part of the brain and you subliminally implant messages or therapeutic content into the subconscious, which is where your emotions are. So you can alter a person's behaviours because if you can alter their emotions, then you can alter their behaviours.
Yeah. Okay. Because that's essentially emotions are what kind of drive our intuition to what motivates us in the world. Correct me if I'm wrong. So
the psychologists will use a technique called cognitive behavioural therapy.
Yes. Yeah.
So your thinking, what that does is your thinking creates your emotions.
Thinking creates emotion.
Yeah, well, you think about something and it'll have an emotional content, and your emotions drive your behaviours.
Sorry, on that, I've actually had this thought before where I don't know. I've thought this before where sometimes I'm feeling anxious, and I'm just sitting down. I'm trying to figure out, did the thought trigger the anxiety, or was I feeling an anxious response and then my brain strung the thought together? And now I'm thinking about this thing that makes me anxious and I'm getting more anxious.
Well, it doesn't have
to.
to.
So are you saying thought first?
The thought's first, right? But the
Okay.
thought doesn't necessarily have to be conscious. So you can have a thought which is actually going on in the background.
Okay.
So someone does something to you, which might not be very nice, and you've got this thing boiling away, which is based on thoughts, which then creates the emotions.
So it can be subconscious thought creating emotion arising, observed by me, conscious thought.
Yeah, when we say subconscious thought, a lot of people out there are going to argue that you can't have that because it's got to be partly conscious and whatever else. But you can still have these thoughts bubble up into consciousness, and they
or awareness at least. Yeah,
or into awareness, and then you get the emotion. So it might be sadness, or it might be anger, or whatever else, and then
rage.
That's right. And then you behave based around whatever emotion you've got. But not everybody behaves the same way. So, if you get rage, some people want to go out and kill everybody. Some people just sort of get quiet and might retreat, or they might move away. And that's based upon, your sort of experiences and the way you were brought up and family values and all that sort of thing.
Yeah, yeah.
So family values are really important because, there's an interesting. My father used to always say, "Oh, I feel a bit under the weather today, Cole."
True. Yeah.
And I thought, go to university, say, "What's this?" Under the weather, it means nothing. So, oh no, just something, that used to happen. My father used to say it, and his father used to say it, and they came from England and they used to say it. So then where does it all come from?
And why do we still say it? Why does it still feel relevant right now? Yeah.
So that's sort of, something that's come through from more than 2,000 years ago. So Hippocrates used to say that under the weather.
Yeah.
Because he used to say that the weather was really important in terms of disease. But, the medicine has rejected that completely for a couple of thousand years. But the actual saying, under the weather, has persisted for more than 2,000 years through different countries and
different cultures. And it does feel like that. And it feels like we're going through this this not new age, but this kind of awakening where the Western sciences are now finally admitting that a lot of, esoteric Eastern kind of things that aren't empirically studied actually have impact. Things from the past actually have impact. And it's nice to see this, this kind of different, almost, I wouldn't so much call it a paradigm shift, but definitely a shift in the direction of just the acceptance of new / old traditional information as well. So it's cool to see that happening. Yeah.
Well, there's an area of science called ethnobotany where people will go. Yeah, they go into I'm pretty sure it's called ethnobotany.
Okay, yeah.
They go in places like the South American jungles, and essentially the jungles are full of all these trees and plants, and which are full of thousands of different chemicals, and some of the people have been using these chemicals for thousands of years to treat various things, and some of them are quite effective. But if you take a plant, for example, it might have 20, 30 different chemicals, and some of them may be effective for headaches, for example. Some of them might kill you. So the scientists go out there and they find out something. Okay, what do you use for this, and how did you treat this? And then they take the chemical, the plant, and they separate all the different chemicals out of that plant, and then they put it into a pill and sell you the pill, which is obviously safer because it's got the one chemical you want.
Yes, yeah,
So aspirin came from the willow tree.
Oh, I didn't know this. Okay.
So there's lots of things. I think there's another one. Heart medication came from one of the. I think it's foxglove.
Yeah.
Is a plant.
Yeah, and that's the other thing is disconnected from body, disconnected from nature. So we don't realize, and the beauty, like the part that baffled me about reading your autobiography was how recent of times it was that your family, your grandparents, went through this completely different world. And my generation, and you're kind of at the middle, but my generation has no concept of a society that isn't comfort. Everything's laid at our feet. Just this beautiful, it's insane to me. Or I like to remind myself that it's insane how underappreciative we are of how fragile society is and how much it can crumble and break, and how much we won't dive into politics, but people are kicking and crying and screaming as if we're living in the worst time ever. It's like, you just need to go back 50 years, if that, and really see if we're living in the worst time ever. And I guess where I'm going with this is we don't appreciate the tribes and Amazonian people and just people living out in the wilderness, the knowledge they have because they're in relationship with the environment, how they survive in there. We think we're knowledgeable. Yeah, I guess we are. It's like everything we do is population level. So yes, we're knowledgeable population level. I'm a bit of a dystopian mindset. We won't get into our politics, but after I went really, the world is going to crumble. I can't trust the government. That's just where my personal intuition went. Whether I'm right or wrong, I might be wrong. But because of that, I now have this, I need to be self-sustainable urgency. I feel like, what happens when the toilet paper goes out, but fuck, next time it's the food that goes out? What are we going to do then? How is any individual in our society today going to live if society crumbles?
You sort of think about it and you think, well, how many people know how to grow, a few veggies?
Well, aren't they making it to some degree not illegal, but they're pushing the feel that you should not be doing that? I forgot what the rule was, but I think it was you can't pass to someone. They're creating some form of a structure against the freedom of individual produce.
Well, I guess some of the issues are, basically from food, we get a lot of foodborne diseases, we get foodborne infections. So, if you don't know how to handle food correctly and you're selling it off to somebody else, you could be giving them some nasty diseases. But, not so much with just sort of like growing some veggies, because essentially you've just grown it and you've, but when you're actually manufacturing a food, it's pretty easy to get salmonella or whatever else.
Okay, yeah, we do need regulations.
So, yeah. That's the only issue. I mean, I was looking one time when I was working with salmonellas, and we had some cow poo with salmonella in it. We put it out in the soil, and it was still there months later.
Yeah, yeah. Okay.
So it was, and if you're growing veggies and stuff and you don't harvest it properly, and it's been grown on, sort of pretty contaminated soil, you may end up with some of that in the. So I guess that's one of the reasons. But, when you're coming down to starvation, you're not really going to care.
Yeah, exactly.
You're going to eat what you can get a hold of.
Yeah.
And most of our society have no idea to do that anymore.
So do all chronic diseases, do they last a lifetime? And can we actually cure them? What does a cure look like?
Pardon me. I won't say they all last a lifetime, because they don't.
Okay.
Mine certainly has, and it certainly hasn't got any better. And for most people, it lasts a lifetime.
Okay.
And if you look at something like long, you can't say, because we haven't had long for very long.
Yeah.
But most and some there's two big distinctions, but in chronic diseases too, which is worth mentioning. there's the degenerative forms where you get much worse, and then there's the non-degenerative forms where you have inflammation, which is like what I've got.
Okay.
So I probably will live a pretty normal lifespan of but not a very pleasant sort of existence in terms of all the pain and issues that you have, and you can't do this, you can't do that because of the sort of condition you have. So there's that type. Then you get the ones like multiple sclerosis where it's degenerative.
Yeah.
So it gets worse over time. Same with rheumatoid arthritis. It gets worse over time. And it can affect lifespan. And obviously so does multiple sclerosis. But so there's two distinct forms there. And I've got my theory on that too, which is a bit, haven't got time to go through that as well. But
okay.
I think the ones that are like multiple sclerosis will develop out of the ones that are chronic but not degenerative. So you need a...
Could you repeat that for me, please?
Well, you've got multiple sclerosis, which is a degenerative form of chronic disease.
Yes.
And you're not going to get rid of it. There's no treatment. No one knows what caused it, how to cure it. You can treat the symptoms, but you can't actually treat the disease and sort of get rid of it.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Then you've got like the fibromyalgia.
Yeah.
Right, which people have fibromyalgia. It's not something that shortens your lifespan, but it certainly gives you a pretty, sort of unpalatable and unfortunate life where you've got all this pain and you can't do things because you can't even go for a walk because you ache so much. And that sort of thing. So to get to the one that's degenerative, you need a bit of a synergism between a few things that I'll explain another time.
All right.
So
do you kind of build and sorry, it might be a bit personal question, like just a resentment in general for the experience of pain? Because I feel like, and I'm not really linking it to you, I'm just thinking pretty broadly. If there's someone who I see experiencing pain, or example, someone in a wheelchair, and I see them very angry, I'm just kind of like, I feel like you deserve whatever to experience what you're experiencing. I'll never take anything, or I try not to take it to heart. I guess, just being someone who, obviously it's not to that extent, but just experiences pain. Do you have a negative response, an anger response, a why me?
No, I don't.
No?
I don't.
Okay.
And I never have.
Okay.
I just sort of, I think if you do, then your pain, it's sort of like if you get what you think about most. So if you don't think about pain, just get on with life, then, you can still do everything you want to do. You may have to do it a bit differently.
Yeah.
And, if you can't do something like I can't do athletics anymore, and I haven't been able since I was 20, so you go and do something else. And I became a nerd because I can sit in a chair and learn.
Bless.
And do things, whereas I can't do athletics anymore. I did canoeing and kayaking for a long time after I got it because you can sit your backside in a boat, and most of my problems was with sort of joint pain and whatever in my legs.
Yeah.
Not so much in my arms. So I could still paddle pretty good, and technically I was still pretty good.
So it wasn't so much well, it sounds like you really early had to learn, because I feel like a lot of people grow up or just go through life not being able to detach from things, especially their identity as well. It sounds like you pretty early learned, all right, I'm not athletics guy anymore. Let that version of you kind of...
It's an interesting when you say that, because I think a lot of top athletes, even when they win the Olympic Games, they go through a stage of depression because that's their identity. So it's like, I got to the pinnacle of what I always wanted to do, but what am I now? I'm not an athlete anymore. I can't do that anymore. So where do I go with life? Whereas, I think you've got to, something happens, you have to change and do something else. And that's where you put your thoughts and where you put your energy. And sometimes I get a bit cranky with my wife because she'll talk about the pain. How do you deal with that?
Yeah.
And I think I don't want to know about it.
You're like, I'm not talking about it.
Because you focus on it, and then all of a sudden it seems a lot worse. So, you focus on what you want, not what you don't want. If you focus on what you want, then the pain seems insignificant.
Yeah. Keep a stiff lip, old
Stiff
chap.
upper lip.
Stiff upper lip, old chap.
That's a pommy thing. You look like a more.
Is that relevant here? Is that that mindset that you feel like you're helping push you through?
It can be.
Yeah.
And like my father and mother and all they all came out from England. It was one of those. And Second World War, they all say, "Oh, keep a stiff upper lip, old chap."
Yeah.
So you don't show your emotions. You don't show your pain. You just get on with it.
Yeah.
And yeah, that sort of helps, I think, because it's if you, like I said, if you think, you'll get what you think about most.
Which,
Think about pain, it gets worse because your mind gets channeled into this,
yeah.
this little channel which becomes like a stream, which becomes a river, where all your thoughts are channeled into this, nothing else. And then you think, I can't do anything else, but you can look at what you can do and put all your thoughts into that, and then that way, the pain seems insignificant, and you don't. It's not. I'm not saying you're not worried about it. You don't think about it.
Yeah. So then how do you distinguish that with like just speech therapy in terms of, if I talk about this, sometimes it feels like if I talk about something and there's an emotion linked to it, I feel like there's an unprocessed feeling in there. And I can't personally figure out, when I talk about this and I feel this thing and it comes out again and I'm angry or whatever, am I getting it out, or am I resurfacing it and now ruminating on it and making it real again? I don't know how to distinguish between whether it's this or that.
Look, it's all. Look, if you think of something like pain, for me, it's always there. When the weather changes, it can be much worse, and I can't hardly move, or it can be, But I think, if it's really bad, then I just go sit in the computer and do stuff where I don't have to get up and run around. And if it's pretty good, then I might go out and mow the lawn, because I know that I might not be so good in 2 hours. So I mow the lawn and do what I can do. So it's just a matter of juggling things around and doing what you can do, and not thinking about, you can feel sorry for yourself and think, oh yeah, I got all this pain, big deal. It doesn't matter. You just get on with what you can do. I mean, everybody can do something.
Yeah.
And you just got to focus on that being part of what you are.
Yeah, because I think, with any type of thought, you can, if you're feeling what you're feeling, sure, but is it helping me? It doesn't even need to be progress, but is it now maladaptive to life? I feel like there's always a point where it's like, I can't use this anymore. Or even like an anxiety or a thing, if I have like something like a build up for something, sometimes I try to convince myself, no matter what I think or feel about it, in the moment, I'm just going to be experiencing the thing. So no point actually overly ruminating on that particular thought or feeling about the thing. So
anxiety is a disease of thinking, essentially.
Yeah.
So if you are in the present moment, you won't have anxiety. So if you're thinking about the past or thinking about the future, you can have a problem with that. But if you concentrate or focus on the present, then you don't really have anxiety. So.
Yeah, but we are evolved to do so, but I think we're now, again, living in this new generation where we're overly anxious, overly in our mind, overly analytical, but the concept of being anxious about the future 100% kept us alive, today by natural selection.
Yeah. Well, like I say, exactly what you say. We have a fight and flight response, and if a lion's coming to eat you, you better get anxious real quick and do something. But once the lion's gone, then you don't have to be anxious anymore. So in primitive times, anxiety was more of a thing of it's happening now, and that's it. But we live in a different society where anxiety can be present all the time.
Yeah.
So you might have a boss that's a real so-and-so, and he's constantly at you, and you're constantly feeling your stomach turning and feeling anxious about life in general.
Yeah.
Or, you've got a mortgage loan and you feel anxious, and it just continues on. So, when you're talking about a fight and flight response, you get these chemicals called cortisol, which floods around your body. It never seems to go, and that affects your immune system and affects a whole range of things, which affects your health.
Do you believe we're at just a baseline higher cortisol as a society, or what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. You can measure cortisol. Some people are definitely higher all the time in their anxiety levels. You got your adrenal glands on top of your kidneys, which produce this cortisol, which is based upon how you think and you react.
Yeah.
And if you've got sort of high levels of those chemicals, then it's not good for your health, obviously.
Yeah, of course.
But once again, it's a lot of it's about thinking and anxiety. If we didn't have anxiety, we probably would be lucky to be here.
Yeah, exactly. Well, the ones who didn't make it.
Yeah, they weren't ready. Right.
So if we're here, we made it. So everything that encompasses human right now, I guess, is to some degree, unless we, overdo it, was adaptive to be here. Do you think the chronic conditions, can I call them conditions as well as diseases? Or
syndromes.
Or syndromes, yeah. Could they be passed down hereditarily?
My personal view is no,
Okay.
but you can have a genetic predisposition.
Yeah.
So if like rheumatoid arthritis, for example, there's a thing they look for is rheumatoid factor. And if you don't have a rheumatoid factor, you're probably not going to get rheumatoid arthritis.
Gotcha.
So you can be more likely to get a particular chronic disease. Most people, I think, in the medical field or scientific field believe it's caused by some sort of virus or some sort of microbe pathogen,
Yeah.
which doesn't necessarily mean it's genetic. But like I say, a predisposition. There's some people, essentially if you get AIDS and you don't have medication, you're going to die with AIDS.
Yeah.
There are a few people that I've read that they don't die with AIDS.
Yeah.
They have their immune system is slightly different. And it's something that allows them to be able to live.
Yeah.
When they did the myxomatosis stuff in rabbits.
Can't just drop that word on me like.
Myxomatosis.
Yes, the myxomatosis.
Yeah, that's the disease they put out to basically control rabbits.
Oh, all right. Yeah.
So if you put basically the first time they put it out, they have this massive kill of all the rabbits because the rabbits, the disease just gets in the population that kills off.
Just wiped them out. Yeah.
Pretty much most of them. But a few of them are resistant and to the virus.
Yeah.
And those ones breed on.
Oh,
So,
true.
so
Yeah.
over time, the next generation, most of them will have that genetic change or to their immune system,
Like
which
defense. Yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
which means then the myxomatosis can't affect. They might only affect 20% next time.
You've
And the
almost
next
made a worse
generation-
problem in that scenario.
Well, yeah, I mean, you could there's always some in the population that are a bit different.
Yeah, but that's the point of an evolutionary arms race, and
Yeah.
the genetic diversity that humans have is to prevent basically a pathogen from winning out in that battle that you just explained there.
Yeah, because everyone's immune system is a bit different,
Mm.
and that's because ever since time began, when there was microbes that were here long before us, but they've been trying to invade us ever since we evolved, or long before we evolved into humans.
Yeah.
So they developed new strategies to basically get into our body and wreak havoc. But our immune system has to develop new strategies to be able to eradicate them.
Yeah.
If you don't, you die. But if you're one of those few that does develop that new strategy, then that trait will be carried on into the next generation.
Yes.
So, things like leprosy used to be quite contagious. But as time went on, basically people lived through it. And it might take you 7 years now to come down with leprosy.
Yeah, okay.
Because it's not as infectious. It's still just as bad, but it's not highly like COVID.
Yeah.
You breathe on somebody and they got COVID.
Yeah.
So
Survival of the fittest.
pretty much that's it.
Yeah. Do you think this whole phenomena is it relative? Like, if we're saying it's environmental, is it a new phenomena? Is it something that our generation is experiencing more than the previous generations?
In terms of what, COVID or any other disease?
I meant more just the chronic diseases, long-term diseases.
Chronic diseases have been around. They were talked about back in Hippocrates' time, 2,500 years ago.
Wow. Okay.
But when you compare, someone's got aching joints and aching pains, it's nothing compared with smallpox or the plague or leprosy
Or diarrhea back in their day.
Well, you died with diarrhea, cholera. You lose about 8 litres of fluid every day.
That's it. Yeah.
So you're not going to live very long with cholera. So from a medical perspective, you got some sore joints. Who cares?
Come on.
Who cares? I mean, 2/3 of the population died from the plague in one pandemic of Europe. 2/3 of the whole population.
Wow.
So who cares? The chronic disease has always been there, but now that we have vaccines and we have antibiotics and all those things to treat
We have comfort
most of these
as well.
things.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, we don't have the plagues. The smallpox has been eradicated
Yeah.
because of vaccines. So I know all the people out there that don't like vaccines. It's been eradicated only because of vaccines that we don't have smallpox.
Why are you yelling at me, Colin?
No, I'm not yelling. That's all the people. All the ones that don't like vaccines. So yeah, vaccines have.
It's a beautiful technology, 100%.
Well, you go back in time, like when my dad was a boy back in the early 900s. Half his class were sort of on their knees, crippled with polio.
Yeah, true.
And polio vaccine basically people don't know about polio. Half people, except unless you listen to the news and you think about what's happening in Gaza. Now they're trying to vaccinate a lot of people because it's coming back.
I had no idea about that.
Oh, yeah, there's lots of polio in the Gaza because of all the... Basically, there's been so much bombing and going on that there's all the sewage and everything that's in the water, and they can't... the only water they can get has got a lot of disease in it. And polio is really making a big resurgence in Gaza Strip, and they're in there now trying to vaccinate all the kids as much as they can to prevent it from spreading. So it's all vaccine. If they didn't have the vaccines, then they'd all be...
Yeah.
And it's a terrible disease. It's crippling, it affects the nervous system.
Yeah.
Once you got it, you're not getting over it.
Yeah. I'm going to respond in a way that makes me morally consistent with my views. We love vaccines that have had 5 years plus of data to know if they're safe and effective.
Well, that's had a long time to know.
Yeah. Awesome, man.
Not all vaccines are very nice either.
Yeah.
I mean, the polio, not the polio, the smallpox vaccine was a pretty nasty vaccine, but it's nowhere near as nasty as smallpox.
Yeah. Well, there's that instance where I thought it was the polio, but I might be wrong. It was, one of them they put out, which was essentially a bad idea. It's kind of...
Oh, there's SV40?
I don't know,
Yeah, SV40 was a big mistake.
Yeah, okay.
They grew the virus in monkey kidney cells. I'm not sure I can't remember exactly which disease they were trying to solve. But anyway, the SV40 the monkey kidney cells already had a virus in it, which I didn't know about. So when you extract the virus that you want, it also extracted the virus they didn't want.
Yeah, shit.
So a lot of it was done by what's called ultracentrifugation. So they just spin it around. The virus comes down, but it settles at exactly the same. Two viruses, they both settle here.
Okay.
Not one there, one there. So when you take off the bit you want, so it comes down in layers, right? So you have, based on molecular size, so you'll have the virus might sediment here, but so's the other virus, which is the monkey virus.
Okay, yeah.
So
they couldn't extract that at the time.
They couldn't separate the
Yes,
two. Well,
okay.
No. So when they injected this vaccine, they injected this monkey virus, and fortunately it didn't do anything.
Okay.
But if it was bad luck, then and it did affect people, then it would have been a disaster. So things can happen based upon what you know. I mean, that wouldn't happen today because they make the vaccines in a very different way.
Yeah.
So
We've come a long way, man. We've come a long way.
Certainly have. If you look at the way that they first developed smallpox, the guy that first did it basically got the scabs shoved up people's nose. Okay. To vaccinate them that way. And then they got, and then another one, Jenner, the first guy that developed the vaccines, they got cowpox and they cut the little kid. No, it was his gardener's son. They cut his arm, they put the smallpox from a cow, or it's not smallpox, it's called cowpox, which is very similar to smallpox. They put it in his skin to infect him with cowpox.
Hey, the concept's there. I get the idea.
He got sick because of cowpox. Yeah. But the cowpox was similar to smallpox.
Oh, so it was effective?
Incredibly effective.
I thought we were mocking him.
He got sick from the cowpox.
Yeah. But it acted the same as,
then without ethics, he injected the kid with smallpox, which normally would kill somebody. But the kid didn't get smallpox because the cowpox was so similar to smallpox. He developed immunity, which prevented the smallpox. Yeah. So that's where it all started from. But you'd never ever be able to inject someone like that these days. But I guess things have their beginning somewhere.
Exactly, and I appreciate the work you're doing, man, because you're essentially taking. Because again, we need to remind ourselves that we don't have the complete science. Anyone who says they knows it all is just wrong. We simply don't. So this link, this currently unexplained link, this common denominator between these chronic diseases, feels like you're taking that step further, and that essentially evidential but leap of faith to understand what is this link between it all. So I think it's awesome what you're working on. I'm keen to see, because you've got a few books lined up, don't you?
Yeah, the next this one's sort of basically giving you an idea of how it links into the environment and sort of where I've come from, how my thinking's gone, and then the next one is a lot more difficult to read, I guess, but it's the theory and how it all sort of works, and basically ties in how pretty much all the chronic diseases come from a similar place.
Okay. Well, I'm keen to, I'll get involved, man. I'll try read it. I'll digest it, and we can have a chat and make it a bit more. If it's too scientific, digestible like this for some layman terms, basically.
Well, you can sort of quiet me down if I get a bit carried
Yeah, I'm
away.
like, wait, what does metamorphosis mean or something? Like, we'll use some non-nerd words as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what is your book called? This book one?
The book one is called Arthritis Pain is a Weathervane.
Mm.
So essentially what it's, Weathervane sort of tells you where the weather's come from, all that sort of stuff, and Arthritis Pain, which is pretty, I guess, self-explanatory.
Mm.
I came up with all these nerdy names to start with. My wife says, you can't put that out there. People see that and say, oh, this is just some nerd. But no, they won't even understand it. So anyway, I only just recently come up with that idea because I think a lot of people relate to the fact that, your pain gets worse, it goes up and down, depending upon seasons.
Yeah.
So there's no question it goes up and down in a day. It goes up and down with the seasons, and it goes up and down annually.
Mm.
So you think, like the ENSO sort of thing, what they call it, the Southern Oscillation. I forgot the name of it.
We're talking like electromagnetic fields?
No, not electromagnetic fields. When you get the, I forget. It's basically called the ENSO. It's like when you get,
Functionally, what's the point of that?
When it changes. So there's times when you get major droughts in Australia.
Okay.
There's time we get lots of rain in Australia.
Okay.
And it's sort of between, and when the oceans heat up and when they cool down, and you get lots of different changes in the weather. So when those sort of things happen, you get changes in your symptoms and the severity of your symptoms as well. So it's not just daily or weekly but seasons make a huge difference.
Yeah. Okay.
So like this is my real bad season for all sorts of pain.
Mm.
So it's even worse than winter. So a lot of people say, oh, when it gets to winter, my pain gets worse.
Mm.
But it's actually worse in the springtime because the weather's so much more variable.
Okay.
So you get ups
not
and
not
downs.
as consistent. Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
And then, of course, as you get, sort of the weather really sort of becomes stable in the autumn time. It's most people say, oh, I feel pretty good in autumn.
So there may be a link between volatility juxtaposed to a particular type of weather. So the volatility might affect it more than simply rain, good, bad, sun, good, bad.
Yeah. It's like the winter time. The worst things of all, which is becoming, in a winter time, is we get a lot of these what they call polar sort of changes. So we get this winds and all sorts of cold weather that comes up from the polar regions. Yeah. And every time I hear that word polar on the weather report, I think, oh no, here we go. Mm. And things invariably get much worse. And that's normally just at the end of winter, normally in August. And August is by far the worst month for very changeable sort of weather, and it's also the worst month for arthritis and all those other pains for me, and I'm sure it is for other people too, because I've interviewed hundreds of people about this sort of stuff.
Yeah, well, this has been a very, I guess, eye-opening, just informative talk and reading the book for myself. So I'm sure many people who are actually experiencing it might feel heard and understood, knowing that someone's actually doing the work scientifically to uncover this.
And when you get told it's all in your mind by your doctor, you can say, well, this bloke here, read this book.
Have you read this? Yeah.
But that's the second book that you'll need to give to your doctor, because then it's pretty hard to dispute that sort of stuff, because I'll give all the science behind it and so forth.
So for the time being, the book is being published or has been published at this point in time, and where can people go to find it?
On Amazon. So I'm self-publishing through Amazon. It'll be on Kindle, soft cover, hardcover. Yep. So you can get it through there, and I'll publish a second. It'll be a series of 3 or 4. Yep. So I'll publish the second one on there as well when I've completed that one. Awesome.
And we'll definitely we'll make this a little pod series, man, because I'm genuinely intrigued by this. I want to see where this goes, and there's so many sneak peeks that we've just touched on, even off camera, that you're like, oh, it's coming. So I'm keen to see how it plays out and where we go.
The thing that'll be very interesting, I think, it's going to be the prediction part, because all the doctors instantly roll their eyes and sigh whenever you say, I can can predict that we're going to have a weather change.
Yeah.
And as soon as you say the word predict, it's like, oh God, not again.
Yeah, exactly. And that was my point, is that it has an element of mysticism, which I personally love, and I don't shy away from that. But I guess, yeah, in our Western world, we do need that more concrete, sequential, evidence-based understanding.
I'll make it very obvious, and I think you would, no one will need even to go and research it. It'll be obvious why we can do that.
Colin Carbis, thank you for taking the time, man. I appreciate it.
Yep, no worries. Thanks a lot.
I'll see you next time.
Look forward to it.